Number 8. Grizz Kramers and Lazan Freon. In April 2014, two Dutch girls mysteriously disappeared after heading out to hike the El Pianista Trail in Panama. Lazan Freon was 22 years old and Grizz Kramers was 21 years old when they decided to save up some money and plan a 6-week-long vacation to Panama. They hoped to learn Spanish and assist the locals there by volunteering with children. On March 15, 2014, the girls arrived at their destination. Everything was going smoothly for the first 2 weeks, but things took a turn when they decided to take a hike near the clouded forest surrounding the Baru volcano. Just a short distance from Boquete, they began their hike on the El Pianista Trail in the early morning hours on April 1st, but tragically, the women were never seen again. 10 weeks after their initial disappearance, a backpack belonging to Freon was found near a riverbank. The bag contained some cash, a camera, a passport, and both of their phones, which were still in working condition. Call logs showed that the women had attempted to call for help multiple times, but some of the calls never went through due to a lack of reception. Unfortunately, 2 months after the women vanished, rescue teams discovered roughly 33 bones that had been scattered along the riverbank. A boot with a foot still inside it, and a pelvis were found. DNA testing proved that they belonged to the young Dutch tourists. Interestingly, there were no discernible scratches of any kind on the bones, which baffled forensic anthropologists. The most plausible explanation for their disappearance was that the girls made it to the top of the trail and then kept going, which resulted in them losing their way. Another theory is that perhaps the girls stumbled across something in the forest they weren't meant to see, and in order to keep them quiet, they were killed. Some think that flash floods could have been responsible for their deaths, and that the whole thing was just an unfortunate accident. It's hard to imagine, though, that some type of foul play wasn't involved, since the skulls of the women were never recovered. However, to this day, nobody is quite sure exactly what happened. It's a mystery that has yet to be solved. Number 7. Death in the Alps. A British skier visiting the French Alps accidentally fell to his death after attempting to ski down an unmarked slope with a friend in March of 2022. The 34-year-old accountant named Michael Rowell from Farnborough had started skiing at a young age and had a lot of experience in the sport. He had visited the Chamonix area to hit the slopes with his pal Niall Jones, but things took a deadly turn when they decided to take a detour between a black and red run. They both quickly realized that their new path was not safe and tried to retrace their route. When interviewed, Jones explained that the pair had spent most of the day desperately trying to find their way back to the marked ski runs, with little success. He said there was a moment when Rowell separated briefly from him to see if he could find a route down the mountain. However, when he called back to Jones that there was no way down, he went to meet him where he was. He followed Rowell's tracks in the snow, but he was nowhere in sight. He shouted his name and tried calling his phone, but there was no response. He assumed he had tried to ski down the hill, but when he made his way back down to where they were before, he noticed a lonely ski stuck in the snow. Jones called for help soon after, and a helicopter was dispatched to his location. A mountain rescue team managed to find Rowell, but his body was in rough shape, and he had sustained various fatal injuries. They determined that Rowell had taken off his skis to make his way up the mountain, but had accidentally slipped and tumbled over the edge, leading to his unfortunate death. Number 6. Yosemite Waterfall. In August of 2019, a Romanian tourist visiting Yosemite National Park in California tried to make his way down to the base of the waterfall, but slipped and fell. 21-year-old Lucian Mew had hiked to the Bright Vale Fall, which is one of the most outstanding waterfalls the park has to offer. He intended to make his way to the base of the falls, but things didn't work out how he'd hoped. There is a specified trail that people are instructed to stay on. However, Mew decided to ignore their advice. According to a statement released by the Yosemite National Park, Mew wandered away from the established trail and attempted to climb up a boulder. He bypassed multiple signs warning against leaving the designated path, but he continued on. Sadly, he slipped trying to scale the slippery rocks and and fell roughly 20 feet, 6 meters. A rescue team wearing sticky-soled shoes carefully made their way to the tourist. The extent of Mew's injuries were not disclosed to the public, but he was rushed to the hospital by helicopter and later passed away. Number 5. Australian Outback. An 18-year-old from Belgium had visited Byron Bay in Australia in 2019 and was never heard from again. Lisa Hayes, who had also been in Australia, had briefly spent time with her cousin Theo Hayes shortly after he arrived in the country. He was traveling on a working holiday visa and decided to visit Byron Bay after his cousin had recommended it to him. Lisa said goodbye to him at the Brisbane bus station, and that was the last time she ever saw him. He arrived at his destination and stayed at a hostel called The Wake Up. Employees working there notified authorities on June 6, 2019, since the teen had failed to check out at his intended time 3 days earlier. Theo's family also made calls to the New South Wales police on that same day because they had lost contact with him. Oddly enough, the man's passport and belongings were still in his room when he was reported missing. An investigation into the matter began, and Theo's phone signal was last determined to be near the area of Cape Byron on June 1st. The search continued for some time, and in July, a hat fitting the description of what he was last seen wearing was recovered by community volunteers in bushland at Tallow Beach. Even though there were many people searching for Theo, his body was never found, leading many to come up with their own theories as to what happened. Some believe he could have fallen from a cliff near a lighthouse, while others think he could have been taken by a shark while swimming in the ocean. However, his cousin Lisa believes that something more sinister could have taken place. At a press conference, she explained that Theo wasn't a risk-taker and he rarely drank alcohol. She said that she doesn't believe he would have gone off by himself into the bushland, and he definitely wouldn't have gone for a late-night swim without company. There are so many possibilities that could have taken place, but nothing has been confirmed since the body has yet to be recovered. Number 4. Kong Tabang Forest. In 2021, an elderly man had the experience of a lifetime when he had too much to drink at a bar in Thailand and got himself lost in the Kong Tabang forest for 4 days. Franciscus Johannes van Rossum, a 78-year-old Dutch pensioner from Utrecht in the Netherlands, downed 5 bottles of Chang beer at a local pub in Pectobury province on August 31st. After finishing his drinks, he decided to head home on his motorbike, which wasn't the best idea given his intoxication. His wife, Rachata Chanwichit, became worried after he never made it back. She went to the bar he had been drinking at to search for him, but she was told that he had left. Rachata tried to call him multiple times, but he was not answering, and so a search party was organized to find Franciscus. Unfortunately, there had been a storm on the night he left the pub, and since he was not in the best mental state, he found himself lost in the Kong Tabang forest. Early the next morning on September the 1st, Rachata received a surprising call from her husband, where he explained he had ridden his bike into the forest and didn't know where he was or how to get home. Even though the authorities knew where the man was, it still took them quite some time to locate him. His motorbike was finally discovered, which allowed a rescue team to stumble across Franciscus, who had, for some reason, been asleep in a puddle of water. The man reportedly spent 4 days alone in the wilderness and was surprisingly unscathed. He had a lot of mosquito bites, but other than that, he didn't have many injuries besides some minor cuts and bruises. He was later interviewed by local media, where he stated, "My phone battery was dead, my motorcycle had run out of gas, and it was raining. He was grateful to be alive when he was rescued and was excited to get home and see his wife again." Number 3. Sahara Desert Nightmare. A former Olympic pentathlete found himself lost in the Sahara Desert. A surprise sandstorm caught him off guard, and he got off course while he was participating in the 1994 Marathon des Sables. Mauro Prosperi was 39 years old when he participated in the marathon in northern Africa. He had stumbled upon this opportunity by chance and decided that he had to compete in the 155-mile, 250 kilometers race. The whole event should have only taken 6 days to complete, but things took a devastating turn on the 4th day when Prosperi was hit by a violent sandstorm. Prosperi described the experience as being swallowed by a yellow wall of sand. He couldn't see, and he could barely breathe as the sand whipped his face like a storm of needles. There was nobody else around him when the wind picked up, and he decided he had to keep moving to avoid being completely buried by the sand. The storm lasted 8 hours, and by the time it died down, it was already dark. Prosperi slept in a sheltered spot until morning, but he still didn't think he was in any real danger and believed he was still on the right course to finish the race. However, when he woke up, he realized that his surroundings had completely changed. He didn't think he was lost and thought he could easily make it back to the finish line using his compass and map. After running for 4 hours, he began to think he was in trouble. He climbed to the top of a dune, but he couldn't see anything for miles in every direction around him. This is when he realized he was lost. Even though he had prepared for the marathon and had brought food and water, he knew it wouldn't last long, and at this point, he only had half a water bottle left. All he could do was keep moving forward with the hope of finding someone who could help him. On his 8th day wandering through the desert, he happened upon an oasis where he rested and sipped on the water for several hours. Surprisingly, he found a footprint in the sand there and grew hopeful that people were nearby. He continued in that direction, and the next day he saw goats in the distance. When he got closer, a young shepherd girl saw him and ran to get help. The shepherds called the police, and when they arrived at their location, he was carried to a jeep and taken to their military base. He somehow had crossed the border into Algeria, and the officials there took him to a hospital where he was able to call his wife. He had spent 10 days lost in the desert. He lost a whopping 35 pounds, 16 kilograms, but he was safe and was finally able to return home. Number 2. Idaho Rescue. A man from northern Idaho vanished in the Fern and Saddle area located in the Panhandle National Forest in June of 2020. 37-year-old Joel Brown had somehow got lost in the forest and found himself stuck in a deep ravine. He was reported missing to authorities by his employers, who said he didn't show up for work that Saturday. He had traveled through thick, steep terrain trying to reach Vernon Creek, but accidentally got himself into a situation he couldn't get out of. Brown's vehicle was discovered by a group of search and rescue workers on Forest Service Road 499, which led them to believe that he had been hiking in the area. Thankfully, he was found alive that next Tuesday by an air crew and was rescued. He only suffered mild hypothermia and was transported to Kootenai Health for a physical examination. In the end, he was lucky to be alive and will likely think twice before hiking alone in the area again. Number 1. Canadian Wilderness. In 2021, Kevin Bear Henry survived 74 days in the Canadian wilderness and described the incident as just terrifying. The 37-year-old, who uses gender-neutral pronouns, got lost on Vancouver Island as they were driving toward Fairy Creek. When darkness fell, Kevin thought they had gone too far up the road and decided to turn around. Kevin continued onwards looking for a spot where they could make a U-turn, but it got to a point where the terrain became so dangerous that the van hit a bump and turned off completely. They were able to restart it, but a short while later it happened again. Kevin thought it would be safer to stay where he was so he could be rescued, but after more than 70 days they began to lose hope. They finally decided to try and walk back to civilization, and after 48 hours, Kevin was discovered by a group of loggers who saved their life. When they were asked how they survived so long in the wilderness, Kevin said he ate and drank anything they could find, including cat food and snow. Would you rather get lost for a couple of days in the wilderness with no life-lasting injuries, or participate in a 155-mile, 250-kilometer marathon in the Sahara Desert? Let us know in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.